Hello, hello. Welcome, everybody. It's Vanessa Petronelli here for your Elite Women Live, raw, real, unscripted, authentic conversations with awesome female leaders who are up to game-changing, amazing work in the world, who are making an impact, making a difference. And this whole conversation series, the basis for all of this, just to kind of bring it full circle, because this is episode 6 now, and I've enjoyed every conversation, but the whole purpose to me doing this is so that you as an audience, as the public, get privy and get access to powerful conversations that entrepreneurs, business owners, people who are up to really awesome things are talking about. So this was birthed out of a really powerful conversation I had with my first guest, Ruby Freeman, a couple months ago. And we were like, my God, like this was such a great conversation. Why didn't we hit record? And when I got off the call with that, I thought, wow, this is such an awesome idea. I would love to do this regularly. And then after the words, there was just like these universal signs, because that's usually how it works, right? And I had more powerful conversations with more women. And then I was like, okay, I got to do this. I've got to make this happen. And this is how the Elite Women Live conversation series was born. And here we are on episode 6. And I'm super, super stoked for my guest today. She is a dear friend and a powerful, powerful woman. Every time I have personal conversations with this woman, I feel different coming out of that conversation. I become more self-aware. I have learned more about myself. I feel deeply seen, understood, and connected by this woman. And I'm so grateful that she said yes to be a part of this conversation today. She's up to some exceptionally cool things. She'll tell you more about that. Without further ado, I don't want to keep her waiting any longer. I'd like to welcome Melissa Joy Kong to the conversation.
Hello.
Here we go. Hello, hello. And hello to everybody watching. So please, just before we dive in, Melissa, I just want to tell the audience, if you're here, if you're watching, please say hello. Don't be a stranger. Bring your curiosities, bring your questions, bring your comments as we dive into this conversation. You're a part of this experience just as much as we're in this together. So please say hello. Tell us where you're from, and feel free to pose any questions. And as we go into the conversation, we'll pause every now and then to answer any questions or any comments that you might have. So thank you, darling, for being here.
Of course. I'm so excited to be here. Every chat with you is a really fun chat.
Aw, thank you. The feeling is so mutual. And there's Brooke. Hi, Brooke.
Hi, Brooke.
Good to see you. Awesome. So what's going on for you? You've had a lot going on. You've been up to some really, really cool things. So I want you to tell the audience, tell people who are watching, like what you've been up to, because I find it so fascinating and so diverse.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely been a work day, mixed with a little bit of everything. I started an agency, a marketing agency, a couple of years ago. So I've been doing that mostly until quite recently. A little over a month ago, I started a project called The Gray Report, which is essentially a daily nonpartisan newsletter, typically oriented around U.S. news, but a lot of times we'll incorporate news about the world, things that are happening outside of the U.S. as well. And it was really just born out of me being, I don't know if anybody out there feels totally confused when they read the news or listen to something on TV about what's going on in the world. But I was just massively confused, right? And like, not a political buff by any means, definitely more like my whole bookshelf is business nonfiction and, self-help kinds of books. So I was not a political buff, not a history buff, but I just found myself becoming increasingly confused about it. And I think that mixed with my professional experience in the media world led me to believe that that's just, media is such a powerful tool, but if people don't understand it, then you really strip it of its power. And so I wanted to bring a little bit of understanding back to, the news again, and back to the way that we come to understand the world. It tends to be political, but, it really includes anything. If there's a big science breakthrough or a big culture story, then that's stuff that I'm going to talk about on the Gray Report as well. So those two things have been keeping me very, very busy.
They've been keeping you up at night, huh?
They sure have. Yeah, they sure have.
It's amazing. And I mean, I subscribe to the Gray Report, and we're going to give you some information later if those of you who are tuning in are interested in subscribing to Melissa's daily report. Let me tell you, it is in depth. This woman does not fuck around. She seriously puts a lot of heart and soul and like research, and just her whole gusto goes into that. I can feel it. It's so well done and so well put together. And I'm not just saying that because you're my friend and because I really admire and respect you. It's like, it's for real. It's something that is so helpful. And when I've checked in and I've been, reading your work, I'm like, whoa, like you spend a lot of time doing this. So like for you, what's the why behind all of this? Like why are you so passionate about spending so much time doing this? And have you always been this way with like your work and with your vision?
Well, first of all, I'm going to like replay this every single time. It's like 4:30 in the morning and I'm bleary eyed and still finishing up a newsletter and just exhausted because it is really taxing. And one of the things I keep thinking about as I do it is that I feel like I should maybe write a weekly blog or do something to talk about the experience of entrepreneurship, especially at the very beginning. Mm-hmm. And I wouldn't even call myself a full throttle entrepreneur. It's right now it's a side hustle. And my hope is to turn it into something, bigger. Like I have a grand vision for it in the future and for what it could look like and how it could reach lots more people to help people feel like they understand what's going on in the world. But we don't really have those experiences, right? I think like false memories is such a real thing where we go back and, someone asks us a question, but they only ask us the question when we're successful, whatever that might mean. And It's really hard to describe in detail not just what happened, but the feeling of what happened, because our feelings about the past change, like the way that I think about what happened yesterday or, 10 months ago or 5 years ago is fundamentally different than the way I experienced it at the time. And so I just keep thinking as I do it and I sit here and I'm just like, wow, this is what people mean, and I've been through experiences like this before, but nothing like this where it's consistently 5-6 hours of work a day after a full day's worth of work, where people who are trying to make something happen and make something out of nothing, like this is the thing they go through that nobody else sees, right? Like we just kind of all assume like we have a great idea. It's super fun to talk about it. Like I remember talking to you about the idea before I launched it and I was so excited about it. And I was bracing myself. Like I knew enough from being in the startup world previously to know that it was going to be a lot. But then you do it and you're like, holy earth, it's a lot.
You can swear if that's your jam.
I was like, do I say shit?
You're on unscripted, girlfriend.
Awesome. Holy earth. That's what I came up with. Holy earth. Yeah, it's a lot, I mean, and I think that is why there are so many truisms about creating new things. You hear people say a lot, you have to be really passionate about it. And it's just like, oh, okay, I've heard that before. But it's so true because if you're not, it's not the thing that keeps you going at 4 a.m. when you have to send something out and you're exhausted. And it's not the thing that makes you want to go dive into, 5 hours worth of news, which like if I was to talk to myself a year ago, I actively avoided the news because it gave me a lot of stress and anxiety. So, to get through those moments, you have to have a really strong sense of like internal invigoration for it, which that's a long way of getting to your question, which is like, what's the why behind it? And the why for me for doing this project is that I'm a believer that media is sort of getting a really bad rap these days. But I left the media industry years ago, in part because I wasn't totally aligned with the way that stories got told and, the way that advertisements line up with stories and just the whole business model of the media industry. And I've always been really passionate about great storytelling. And, I'm sure we'll get to some of the other projects I've done and that you and I have talked about. But a lot of the thread of what I've done over the course of my life, either professionally or from a fun side project standpoint, has been built on pattern identification and taking these big complex topics like love and politics and business and trying to figure out what they all have in common and how to help people make sense of these things that really matter to us in our day-to-day lives, but it's hard to really wrap our heads and our hearts around big topics like love. And in this particular case, the thing I'm wrapping, kind of my arms around is the idea of world news, which lately tends to be a little bit more politically oriented.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm just excited about the idea of like empowering people again to understand their world in a way that doesn't have to overwhelm them. I don't think people should have to read 5 hours worth of news every day to understand what's going on. And I think that, if I'm going to read all that news anyway, I might as well share it with people so that they don't have to do it, but can equally sort of come to understand. And it is, I think it's the other reason I'm so motivated by it is because I think the news is becoming so biased. I don't think this concept of fake news is really a thing. Like it's just as much a propaganda tactic as, anything else. In my personal opinion, there are lots of journalists who do an incredible job and work tirelessly, regardless of whether it's they're writing for a right slant organization or a left slant organization or whatever it is,
right.
That work really tirelessly to try to tell the truth and not be sensational. The fact of the matter is, though, it's really hard to be not biased. It's hard not to attach yourself to the meaning of something or to have an opinion about something. So I'm doing the best that I can to sort of build a media platform from the ground up that creates as little bias as possible and is really, really honest and open when the bias exists. So those are a couple of the reasons I'm really passionate about it, but mostly because I think if we don't really understand what's going on around the world and we don't really, it's hard to really make sense of our own lives and about, what we think and this sort of crazy storm that we're in, politically and culturally. And it's hard on an individual level to really understand your place and how to be a better citizen if you don't understand truly what's going on, in the country and in the rest of the world. So that's what keeps me going every day when I'm churning out the newsletter in the wee hours of the morning.
Whew.
Yeah.
Woman, you're on fire.
I feel it. And I was going to ask you, because I've certainly gone through lots of crazy career transitions. And the thing that I keep thinking about lately is, how do you balance those moments of, wanting to do something with knowing that maybe you have to do something for a different reason? That's kind of, I think I've experienced that. I feel very lucky to have alignment there right now, but I'm curious your thoughts about, like, how do you get through those crazy moments? 'Cause I feel like so many of my friends are going through one of those places, like where they're just kind of a little stuck. And I fully relate to it. I don't know how I've seen my way out of it other than like, the only thing I can think is that I've spent a lot more time dedicated to something that motivates me. So it sort of balances or has balanced things out for me, but I'm just curious your thoughts about that.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, I'm going through my own process. It's so perfectly timed to even have this conversation about, the alignment and when we're in transition and finding the things that we're passionate about and stepping into it. And, I'm all about like my language around it is, and what I teach, all my clients is about creating this soul alignment. And it's actually become kind of a hot topic these days. I see so many coaches and healers and people talking about it, but I think it's becoming such a hotbed for conversation and for people to develop themselves into this alignment piece, because most of us have been operating from a place of misalignment. And when we start to actually discover ourselves and what we're most passionate about, I firmly believe that we come much more into alignment with what's true for us in that moment. And, and the same thing goes with work. I've almost been doing this for almost 9 years, the healing, the transformational coaching, the business consulting, I kind of stack it all under the umbrella of like a consciousness and vibrational upgrade. And my niche is more with leaders and change makers and visionaries and influencers. But, I've gone through so many iterations of my business as well, and every time, like I was just at my network spinal doctor, the chiropractor before this. And I mean, my whole session was about dying, letting the old identities of ourselves that are not aligned anymore die off. And we have to let go of them, and then like stepping into the next version of what's most true for us. And both of these things kind of being there at the same time. And I feel like I'm in that. I've been I've gone through many death processes. And, I think in some of my other episodes, we've talked about the death cycle where, as we up level, as we step into the next thing that we're here to do, who we're here to become, we have to let go of the old versions, the old stuff, right? To make room for that. And I think like that's a part of the alignment process, because the things that I've been doing, there's another version of it that wants to unfold, but I can't bring all the other things with me. Mm-hmm. So as I've gone through these transitions, a great deal of it, the focus for me has been like, I have to walk with blind faith that there is something greater than me. You can call it God, the universe, source, creator, goddess, the divine, galactic beings, higher self, whatever it is that it speaks to you, life, that is guiding this process for me to step into what I'm here to do next. And most of the time, most people trip up because they're not allowing themselves to surrender enough to the process for what wants to come into alignment, what wants to fall into place, And so it's very easy. And I was talking about this with Dr. Matt. Those of you who live in San Diego area probably have heard about Dr. Matt, who's my network doctor. It's like he was even saying this morning in our session, and I so get it. Because we go through this, especially those of us who are in personal development and on like the spiritual path. There's this piece of like, yeah, I'm going to surrender and I'm going to give into it and I'm going to let go. And then the next moment they're worrying and freaking out about something. So it's like, we're not always like, we sometimes think that we're surrendering into these processes of life, these changes that we go through, and yet we're not. And we're trying to cling to all the known, So it's like, for me, it's getting really fucking comfortable being uncomfortable and not knowing and being in the unknown. And what, in this work and in this community, we call it the void, the vastness, the black hole of nothingness and everything. It's like the womb of like a creation of what wants to be created next. That's going to come from nothingness. And oftentimes there's nothing there, and you can't cling to those parts of yourself or the things that you've known in order for the thing that needs to come through next to come into alignment. So the short form of it is, we can't, the mind is always trying to search for safety. It's always trying to search for the known parts of life, what is comfortable, what we're familiar with. And then when we're actually required to step into the next phase of our lives, it's like that part of our mind almost has to like relax into the unknown. And I think the more comfortable we can become as human beings with the unknown and trusting that, there is a soul living inside of this vessel. There's life moving through the veins of our body, like the intelligence that had the ability to create this body, to create this earth, to create this experience we're having, whether you're atheist or not, or like Gnostic or not, like there's something bigger happening. And so, of course, we're going to be somehow programmed in our DNA or at a spiritual level to have some sort of direction or path. But we also have this thing called free will, which we can choose to not follow that and make things sometimes really difficult for ourselves, or follow that and allow things to fall into place. And one of the best books that just talks about all of this, and even from a professional and career perspective, is Michael Singer's book, The Surrender Experiment. I don't know if you've read that, but like, holy shit. Like, I think we talked about it in our last conversation, like that book is so mind blowing because this man literally lived 41 years of just allowing life to lead and show him the way without getting his preferences in the way of how things should or shouldn't be. And it's like, I think we go through these processes as human beings, as conscious individuals, spiritual individuals. And that's how I've been getting through my own cycle. Cause I'm quite frankly, I've been in one myself for the last probably 4 or 5 months, and I'm not out of it, but there definitely is this new part of me emerging, which has been this channeling work and, doing more of the channeling work, changing some of my model of how I've been running my business. And it feels scary. Like I'm fucking scared. Yeah. I'm human. Like, a lot of people are like, you're so courageous and inspiring to step into this. It's like, okay, I appreciate that. And I'm also fucking scared. It's taken a lot of work and a lot of getting comfortable with really scary parts of myself and life and the things that I've, identities and the things that have been controlling the controlling mechanisms within me that also come up, but I'm still moving forward. I'm still listening. And that, that whole process I always come back to. If you want to be in alignment with your soul, with that highest part of yourself, you've got to get inward. You've got to listen. You've got to be still. You've got to get to know yourself. And when you know yourself, not just from your mind and what other people have told you about you or what you should be doing in life, things start to clear up. There's shifts that start to happen, but it doesn't happen overnight. And it doesn't always happen on our watch. So it's a unfolding, that's all it is. It's a constant unfolding. One thing unfolds, the next thing unfolds, and the next, and the next, and the next. And the unfoldment is us getting to know more and more aspects of who we are and ourselves and our passions and the things we're here to do and, the things we're here to offer the world, by being ourselves. So anyways, that was a long rant.
No, I love it. I love it. It made me, as you were talking about that, it made me think about something I've kind of wondered about more and more recently.
Oh, like, there you are. You just paused for a second. You're back.
Yay. It has to do with this idea. Like I don't know about you, but I've always been a big believer in like pull yourself up from your bootstraps. You can be whoever you want to be. You can manifest whatever you want to manifest. And like I've been, thinking that's sort of the way that I've approached life for a really long time. But there's this flip side now, and I think part of it has to do with just the constant consumption of information lately for me, and seeing patterns where maybe I didn't necessarily see them before.
Oh, you're silent again. I don't know what happened. There we go.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah, just keep letting me know if...
Oh, now you're silent again. What's happening? Technology, I swear, the last 3 episodes, this has happened with technology giving out on me. Come on.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Angels of technology, work with us.
I like sometimes like pet my computer just to make and say nice things to it. I'm just love
you. Thank you for cooperating.
Thank you for being so good to me. It hisses at me lately because I opened too many tabs. But yeah, I keep coming back to this idea of like, I don't want to, I'm so attached to the idea of agency and I can be whoever I want to be. But more and more, I keep thinking about how we sort of, how we sort of, it feels almost like when you step back that there's the way of things and we get placed in the way of things. And our choice is not necessarily to be whoever we want to be, but to choose whether we're going to align with.
Oh, pause on what you're saying, dear. I feel like it's juicy and it's like something's interfering and stopping that juiciness from coming forth.
Yeah.
Okay, you're back.
I'm back. Okay. Did you catch all
I heard
that?
the last thing, we're placed in the way of things.
Yeah.
And then the choice if we're going to align.
Yeah. That it's more that we choose whether we're going to align with our place in all the things versus, we're going to be whoever we want in all the things. And so often I find that when I, say, oh, I'm going to, and maybe it's so genuine and real. Like I've had moments where I'm like, I really am going to do this thing, or I'm going to like love this person, or, whatever. And it just gets to a point where it feels so hard, and it just feels like you're going almost against something. The more macro way I've been thinking about it is about, I was learning a little bit more about India and caste systems. And I think a lot of folks who are not familiar with the caste system, and those even who are, would say like, oh, it's not the way we'd want to live, right? It goes very against the idea of the US-based meritocracy,
right,
where you can be whatever you want. The flip side of it is that there's sort of this order, right? It's like how we categorize a lot of things like horoscopes, that like someone's got to be a Capricorn and someone's got to be a Libra, because you need the different personalities to balance the way things are. I sort of wonder if what I'm really getting at is I sort of wonder how much of our path in life is really in our control.
Right.
And it's not to say that I believe in sort of giving up on, like surrendering. I mean, I think surrender is a good word because you're talking about surrender experiment. But it is to say that like things will be okay, even if they don't go exactly the way like you're planning them in your mind. Because they always do and they always have, right? Like it's just kind of the natural flow of things. And
Yes.
I just think it's just it's crazy to think about. This is so morbid, but to like think about how many times a day we could die. Like our heart could just stop, or we could cross the street and like a car could skid, and that we are alive and breathing and mostly on most days okay is such an insane miracle that it just leads me to believe that I'm really not in control of much. Because if it were up to me, I definitely would have died like 50 times by now, like just by my own stupidity, like something would have happened. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
I'm so with you on this. There was somebody who had taught me years ago. It's like literally like, and this is not to be morbid and depressing for those of you watching, this is a really actually powerful conversation, because a lot of times when the word surrender comes up, there's a lot of meaning to what it's not. And I love this piece around control because it's so true. It's like there's literally, I don't know who said this or where I learned this from, but somebody taught me it's like we have this invisible sword always dangling above our head that literally can drop at every moment. And every day we wake up and we go, about our lives and we're doing our thing. We're doing it without really knowing or having control around what's going to take place in that day. Like we think we have a lot more control than we actually do. And I agree with you on that. And the more that I'm on this spiritual journey and the more I am on this path of really knowing myself and my place in the world, the more I'm seeing that like there's the less control I have. And, one of my, I think most humans processes, if I'm frank, in all the clients that I've worked with, and I've probably worked with like thousands of people now, in group experiences to classes I've taught to individual sessions to retreats, like all these things, everybody has some sort of an issue around control and trust and this idea of surrender. It is something that is so up for people. And it comes up often over and over again. And it's like, I sometimes feel that a lot of people actually, I'm kind of having a little bit of an aha moment, come to me to learn how to let go of the control so that alignment can take place. And in the process, trust the path, trust the journey they're on, and learn to surrender to what is. Because in that surrender, see, most people that I encounter, and I thought this myself, believe that surrender is giving up. Believe that, I'm just going to sit back and meditate and put my feet up all day and watch Suits on Amazon or watch Netflix. It's like, that might be the thing you need to do in surrender, sure. And surrender is also a very active process. One of my teachers has even said, you could be very busy when you're in a surrendered state. You can have a lot of stuff going on, opportunities, things coming into your life that are very aligned when you're in that surrendered place. It's just you're letting go of a lot more of what the mind or the ego or the small self thinks should and shouldn't happen. And you're allowing for the other things to fall into place, which oftentimes, I don't know if you've encountered this, but when you've been less attached, when you've been more surrendered, when you've been in this place of like letting a little bit more of the control of the mind go, things seem to fall into place or come together in a way that is bigger and better than you could have even created yourself. Just like you said, if it was in my own control, I could have died how many times over the course of my life, just by the choices I made or the mistakes that happened. So it's the same thing with these other pieces. Like we put an immense amount of pressure, I think, on ourselves to have everything figured out when here's the truth. You're never going to have it figured out. And just when you think you do, you're not going to have it figured out because that's just what it's like to live in Earth School and be in this body, be in this thing called the human experience. So it's like how the dance is, how do I stay surrendered and trust and have this blind faith and go through life, like letting go of the parts of me and the identities that want to go and allow the next version of me to step into place. And also take the inspired action and to make things happen and to manifest. And, I play a lot of this, esoteric type of conversation in my head a lot because there's many schools of belief that say you can be and do anything you want. And as long as you take action consistently and you have goals and dreams and you go for it and you'll make it happen. And then there's this whole other end of the spectrum there. It's like, well, how much control do I actually have over what I'm here to do and who I'm here to become? And what I've come up with, my answer, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts around this too, is I think that we're all playing at different levels of consciousness, levels of understanding. And so we don't get that access of maybe what total full surrender may look like what we talked about with Michael Singer, like reading that book, because we're just not ready to play that game. It's not a bad or good thing. It's not right or wrong. It's not a judgment. It's just, we're only able to play at the level that we can play at. In our consciousness, in the human experience, in our evolution. So it's like if we try to jump from the school of take consistent action, have dreams, and just go crush it and kill it and do it, to I'm on the other end of the spectrum, I'm just going to fully surrender and die to this whole process and let whatever wants to come next. It's like that can almost wreak havoc in like the nervous system and the way some of us are built and just how we understand ourselves in the world. So it's like there's like a process, this natural evolution that we go through, stages of our development, you know, not just emotional, mental development, physical development. Also, I'm talking on more of the spiritual and the energetic development that we've got to go through. So I don't know. What are your thoughts around all of this? I'm kind of curious to hear because this is such an interesting conversation.
Okay, first of all, I took notes because I have multiple things that you're saying, and I'm
I love it. You're such a fun person to talk to.
I'm that overachiever who sits in the front seat of the classroom. That's me for sure. So first, I want to go to that.
Oh wait, you're gone again. Hold on, hold the thought. You're back.
Okay. This is a new theory, so I might change my mind about this theory, but here's where I've come with it. I don't think of our stations in life as hierarchical, but rather about buckets and deltas. So let me explain. So
interesting. This is cool.
So deltas it's a weird.
Hold your thought. You've gone silent again. I don't know why that keeps happening. No, not back. There, now you're back. Let me hear you. Yeah, now I can hear you.
Okay. So deltas are, for people who aren't familiar with the term, the space in between 2 points. And for me, I think about the 2 points being like the greatest joy you can have and the greatest sorrow you can have. And those are obviously not the only points on the human spectrum, but for the sake of my little theory, we're going to go with those two as the delta points. And so, you know, life sitting, maybe in a cubicle, right? Like just doing the same job, not leaving the same city, not engaging deeply in relationships. It's sort of like that, right? Like the highs aren't really high and the lows aren't really low. And then, you know, you add in a significant relationship and the highs and the lows get a little bit more. And then you add in like babies and it gets even, you know, higher. And so as you go and you add these things like becoming an entrepreneur, the delta, you know, like the highs are really high and the lows are really low. And then hiring people and being responsible for other people's like livelihoods, you know, the really, really highs and really, really lows. And you just being the president of the United States, oh my gosh, I would absolutely lose my mind. Like there's so many highs and so many lows. Like, wow, I get to meet like the Queen of England one day, and then I have to make a decision about a nuclear weapon the next day. Like that's like insane highs and lows. And I just think that a lot of times we, and I think it's just a framework, a way of thinking about the world that we try to reach some state of evolution or I guess like Maslow's hierarchy to sort of get to the pinnacle of it. But the way I see it is that we shouldn't be in search of like the upward and to the right graph of happiness where we're just trying to get more and more happy, but rather we should be seeking depth in the delta of our experiences and to learn to be like really surrendered into that. That's where I think the surrender piece comes in, that you're surrendered to the high highs, which people have just as difficult a time accepting as the low lows. Like there's the waiting for the other shoe to drop phenomenon is so real.
So real. Yes.
And then, so the other thing I think is that there are buckets, right? Like there are people who should be the president of the United States. And I think that the number of people who should ever have that job is so small, like really so small. There are a lot more people who aspire to one day do that than I think would be really good at it. There are a lot of people who aspire to be coaches than actually become coaches, whether for the NFL or for, high-powered individuals similar to the work that you do. You know, like there are lots of people who want to coach, but only a few number of people who are born to coach and be really good at coaching. Yeah. And in that way, that sort of comes full circle to what I was saying about like the balance of things. You know, I think we might, I wonder sometimes if I was put in a bucket. And I don't like the idea of being in a bucket, but the reality is like the more and more I watch little kids and how they just like, they are who they are, almost like the moment they are born, more of me leans now toward the nature side of things than maybe I previously thought. And I think that there's so much powerful stuff we can do with nurture. Like it's so important, but I think the scale's more 60-40 than like 50-50, you know, because I believe that the world, the universe has a way of perfecting the balance of things. And that goes to something I wrote down in the note, if I could share it, about the emotion of envy. I don't know what you said that triggered this or brought this up, but I think that when we feel envy, it's indicative of one of two things. Mm-hmm. Either one, that envy or awe, I guess would be the positive end of envy, indicates to us, it sort of hints at our path, you know, like it tells us that we should be doing something because we're drawn to someone, maybe somebody's doing something that we're not, like, you know, a friend who's writing a book, or you know, a person who's in a you know, committed relationship. Like that envy, I think, sometimes hints at our greatest desires and sometimes our greatest callings. The flip side is that I think sometimes envy can often hint at us trying to be something that we're not meant to be. So trying to be in box A when like Jesus, Lord, Spirit, universe meant for us to be in box Y, you know? And so I think there's this like weird, interesting balance. And within whatever box you happen to be in, like, you know, I think we have this sort of stratified society where being a garbage man is not as cool as being like, you know, a CEO or an executive. There are very few people who I think are exceptionally good at being garbage men, you know, like, and it's not to say that, there isn't some imbalance in equity and inequity sometimes. It's just to say that I think that it helps to frame things as both there might be this possibility that we're sort of given or assigned or called to a role to play. And also that within that role, we're responsible for the full delta of our experiences. Because I think that delta is true for everyone. It's just in one bucket, what the high might be is different than what the high is, and vice versa with low for different buckets. I think a lot about like stay-at-home parents, you know, where I have no desire to like cook a great meal. You know, like I am like, I will call someone to food prep, and I will Postmates the crap out of things. Like this is good. Like I hope one day I don't kill my kids by over like indulging them with pizza all the time. But I just like, you know, that's just not my calling. But there's some people, like my boyfriend's mom is an exceptional cook, and you could tell she just gets such joy out of like serving people and like feeding people. And I love being part of the experience of that. But it's like two different kinds of orientations of joy, you know? And I think it's they're so different. Like we're all like kind of in these different buckets, but the buckets are meant to create an equilibrium in the universe, I guess you could say.
Absolutely.
Like, it would be really fucked up if everyone who wanted to be a kangaroo was trying to be an alligator. Like that would be weird. There would be way too many alligators and it wouldn't be good. And you're going to be happier being a kangaroo anyway, because like that's where you're going to find your joy, is in like jumping around and, you know, like exerting your energy and not being in the water all day and not having scales. You know what I'm saying?
I know exactly what you're saying.
That's how I know something's true, when I start to feel.
I love this concept. I love how the framework around it. You're so brilliant with these things. And my mind doesn't work that way. So when I hear these kinds of frameworks and these like matter of fact, like theories, like I fucking love it, because my brain works a little differently. You know, as you were saying,
that is a contradiction, by the way. You cannot have a matter of fact theory. That's the problem with me. I'm very matter of fact about my theories. They're totally theories, totally made that up. I have no idea what I'm talking about.
I know you do know what you're talking about. I think you're brilliant, and I want you to own that, woman. Hi, Jeffrey. You know, as you were talking, it was like this the same image kept coming up in my mind of if you've ever watched those talent shows, you know, like America's Got Talent or American Idol or the X Factor or whatever, and you've got somebody that comes to stage, and I mean, we know it's all set up and all that. We understand that it's all part of the production and the drama and the laughter and the ratings. But there's so many people that will come up on stage to audition to be the star, you know, to be the person who's like the next, you know, Mariah Carey, you know, or Bryan Adams or whatever it might be, you know, and they come up and they're just not a singer. They're not whatever it is that they're trying to think that they are, based on what they envy in others or desire deeply to be, based on some sort of conditioning or programming or belief of what they'll be like when they reach that level of status or fame. You know, and it's like we're trying to be in other buckets, you know, and I'm with you on that, because I will see even sometimes clients and whatnot, like feeling envious or inferior of other people in authoritative positions. And I will say to them, it's probably because you are meant to be in that powerful position, you know, and you're not. And so there's like a part of you that's getting triggered, because it's time for you to step up and own it, and own who you are, and own your power, own your gifts, and share them more diligently with the world, rather than sitting in the audience or in the participant role, you know? And so it's like, I mean, for you, what do you think in this process, like for people to learn? I love the Delta analogy. I love that. And I agree with you. It's like we go into these buckets, and maybe those buckets might change. Maybe they don't. But it's like deepening the Delta experience we're having when we're in that bucket. Like, what do you think somebody needs to do, or to, like, what kind of choice does somebody need to make in order to know what bucket they need to be in, so that they can actually start to explore the Delta of that particular bucket? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think it almost, I think it can, just as much as you're positioning it that way, can happen the other way, where if you focus on the deltas, then you kind of find your way to your bucket.
Yeah,
and true. So, you know, what I mean by that is, like, I think that I actually think all of us can feel this to some extent, but it's just a matter of like whether we choose to ignore it day to day or not, or do something about it. We can feel whether something, like a behavior, a pattern, a relationship, is either making you feel more alive or detracting from your aliveness, which is why like TV is so interesting, because a lot of people use TV, and I certainly watch, like, I have my couple shows too. But I've never been like, people close to me will tell you that I've spent like years of my life not owning a TV, you know, just because I know that if it's there, I'll want to watch all the things. And TV is like a good example of an activity that I think for many people is numbing. And so it does the opposite of like build Delta, you know? And so, and I think about this all the time when I'm at the gym, because everything's in slow motion and I'm in a lot of pain, but it's that, you know, consistently, like I'll go to these gym classes, and the coaches will say, like, if like, this is where it makes a difference. And they'll say it at like 40 minutes in. And I'm like, shut up. I already made a difference. Like, I showed up and I exercised for 40 minutes. Don't tell me that this is where I become strong, you know? But it is, that's in my head, you know, when I'm sitting there in the class, like, come on now, you know? But it is so true that it's the moments toward the end of a thing when it feels really hard, and it feels like it's requiring a lot of you, and there's pain, sometimes even physical pain, like the pain of a heartbreak, or the pain of like losing a friend, or the pain of like letting go of a path you didn't take, even though there's joy in the path you did take. That's a whole other thing we never talk about, is like when you make a really wonderful decision or choice in your life, whether to like love somebody or move to a new city or take on a new job, there's also this like weird kind of subtle pain that comes along with all the things you're not choosing because you're saying yes to something else. But I find it so interesting that we, you know, there are those moments in all of our lives where we really do actively avoid pain, which goes to your sense about control. And I think control often is synonymous with comfort, and our desire to achieve comfort. And it's the very thing that we're is supposed to sort of stray from is this notion of comfort and control, and yet those are the things we gravitate toward. Um, and I don't really know why that is. Like I think that there's a lot of times, and I was thinking about this before as we were starting. We were chatting about, like you were saying about the music shows. Everybody does want to be the celebrity, but it's also because of how we've like codified success and meaning and value. Like it doesn't have to do with being a great singer, like I'd love to be Beyonce, but the reason I want to be Beyonce is because I want to feel accepted and I want to feel seen, and I want to feel like loved. And those are things that I think we can get in our own bucket way,
Exactly.
And it's just striving to be beyond, like we have to accept and like be real with ourselves about what we really want, which are these like root emotions. And that's true for all of us, which is why it's like, if we can focus on that, we can relate to just about anybody. But then how we go about getting those things, because I don't think that it's weird to want love and acceptance and, to be seen and understood. Like I thought that they're so human and normal, but the way we go about doing that can cause us content or malcontent.
Yes.
And I think so often we go about doing things in the way that like society has created sort of a structure. And again, it goes back to what we said in the beginning about like, you're either going to flow with the current or you're going to flow against it. Like in some weird ways, there are a lot of culturally built structures that are almost like a defiance against the way of things, like the natural way of things. But it's that's how companies sell makeup. So there's a reason for it. But
it's very true. It's very true. And exercise
went like 12 different directions. Sorry.
No, and I love it. But this is this conversation. Like we flow, and there's value that comes up, and it's all connected in its own way. So I love it. One of the things I think that's so important, and I think it kind of ties a lot of these pieces together, is when you start to get to know yourself, some of the most fundamental exercises, and I've given this a lot over the years to clients, is your values, like knowing your values and knowing what your needs are. And like my needs are like non-negotiables. And when I take my clients through that process, or when they're in one of my programs, it's having them really get to know themselves on a core level, because those things don't typically change. And one of the things that I've always said about, especially the needs exercise too, is like, what are the needs that are going to help you to feel like safe, comfortable, like the basic needs are met, all of that type of stuff, and go through that list. And how much of it are you expecting the partner or the job or the business or the money to be able to supply these needs? And how much of it are you still giving it to yourself first and foremost? Because when a lot of our basic needs and our values are not actually, like, we haven't discovered what they are, and we haven't done the work to discover what they are, then we start to make a lot of choices based on what society says we should be doing, or what our parents says we should be doing, or our partner, or teachers, or this or that. We're not actually thinking for ourselves. We're not actually falling into alignment with like who we're here to be, which then we start to understand, oh, like this is my bucket that I'm going to be in. Like I'm meant for this. I'm meant to stretch into this, or I'm not meant to stretch into this. I'm meant to go to this height, and I'm meant to go to this depth, So I always feel like most of these conversations I have with people, at least in my world, it's like, it's wise to spend time getting to know yourself. Rather than just acting on what you think you should do or who you think you should be. It's wise to sit down and understand, your values, your needs, like who you are as a human being, and what you need to fully function and thrive in the world. And then start to make some choices in your life around partners and jobs or businesses or entrepreneurship or fame or whatever it is. It's like when you start to know the basis of who you are, the makeup of your being, and you're willing to explore that depth, this other stuff is it kind of starts to make a lot more sense why you're choosing certain things or not choosing certain things, why you're playing a certain role or not. Because it always comes down to that. Like, we won't even know the bucket that we're meant to be in if we're not willing to even know ourselves and to know the core of our being.
Yeah, I'm really with you as you were. I would even like I'd add something to that too. Like I think what you're really getting at is just this self-awareness that a lot of us skirt away from, because a lot of times it's really hard to make the effort to see ourselves clearly.
Yes.
And actually, I think one of the greatest pains in life is when there's deltas between not so much like not getting what we want, but rather when there are separations between who we believe ourselves to be, how other people perceive us, or more specifically, how we perceive other people perceiving us, and how we're actually behaving. And those spaces are really, really painful spaces. It's funny. I was thinking as you were chatting about yesterday, my friend Sean tweeted something. Sean Johnson, his handle is intentionally, and he is just fabulous. And he tweeted yesterday, "My favorite people are those that can hold two conflicting ideas in their head. Everything important is nuanced and often paradoxical." And I just read that. And I thought it was so true. I mean, there's so much paradox, and I think that, this kind of ties to what you were saying earlier about surrender and the idea of surrender, and how surrender is about like letting the flow of things happen, but it's also an active process. And those two things are paradoxical. And it reminded me of one of my favorite authors. His name is Bob Goff. Have you ever heard the advice, it's just as important to say no to things as it is to say yes to things. Like the most successful people are really good about saying no. I've sort of subscribed to that just because people say it all the time. But this guy, Bob Goff, who's just like so absurdly infectious and just like talk about goals. Like I have goals to be like Bob Goff. Like I really do think like, what would Bob Goff do about this? He's just like so infectious and wonderful. But he has this rule where he just says yes to everything. Like if people ask for an interview or people want to, like in his best-selling book, he has his phone number in the back. You can call the guy. And he'll pick up. It's crazy. He says he gets like 70 calls a day, and he like picks them up and answers and chats, because he's just kind of a yes guy. He's like, just say yes to like everything that comes your way, which is really sort of aligned with the Surrender Experiment by Michael Singer. Mm-hmm. But what Bob does is he has this thing called Quitting Thursday. So every Thursday he quits something. Which I think is just such a fascinating approach, like versus this approach we take, which is like, okay, we'll say yes to something one day a week. He says yes to something 6 days a week and then quits something on the seventh day that's not working, isn't serving him. So the reason I bring that up is because I think it's a really fruitful exercise when we think about like, what does this all mean for like the application of life, to turn the things we believe on their heads and assume that the opposite is true for a day. Yeah. Nothing that's going to get you like in legal trouble or like going to release substantially hurt people.
That in there right now.
That's a disclaimer, like a really big asterisk next to that. But just like the truisms, that we hear a lot. Like, what if we flipped it on its head, and like if somebody says that it takes on average, 6 months to start growing your business, like what if it took 6 years? Like, how would you do it differently? Or would you do it in the first place? What if it took 6 weeks? Like, how would you approach it differently? What would you do? So I just like, for anyone who's out there, like wanting a prompt for like how all of this applies, I think that the best way to like approach life is the next time you catch yourself in a thought, where you are sort of going on an implicit assumption, and that in and of itself is a challenge to catch yourself, to just like reverse it and see what would happen if you just did the complete opposite, because it allows you to get out of the implicit frameworks that all of us have. And to see things more clearly. And it's crazy how much life expands when we can think outside of our own frameworks.
Yeah, it's so true, isn't it? We just open up to so much more possibility and understanding. And I also believe compassion toward ourselves and other when we start to do that. I'm so with you on that. Can you believe it's like almost at the 60-minute mark? We're like coming up at the end.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me at all. Have we ever had a conversation that's been shorter than an hour?
Never, girl. Never. This is why. I mean, there's so much juice in the things that you have to share. And I love the different ways in which you are able to express and explain these concepts. because we're on this exact same page. I'm totally with you. And just the way you think, I feel is so different than the way a lot of people think. And it doesn't surprise me that you are actually doing something like the Gray Report, which we're going to talk about in a second so that people can come and find you and join your list and anything else that you want to share with the audience. I mean, it's not surprising that you have a more unbiased approach to looking at the media and news and what's going on in the world, because you have such an interesting way of looking at both sides and and seeing what fits and understanding like both ends in that way. I mean, it's just I always feel so much more, like I said before, intelligent and self-aware after I have a conversation with you.
Hey girl, it goes both ways.
Thank you. Thank you. It's been amazing having you here. So before we wrap up, if you're watching or you're catching the replay, if you have any questions for Melissa or I'll be tracking, and she'll be tracking the thread as it comes up. We will be sharing this to our tribes. So if you have any questions right now, for those of you who are on, I think that there's somebody here tuning in, feel free to make a comment, ask a question for us before we wrap up. And as we allow, that individual to do something, if they want to or not, how can people stay in touch with you, and what do you want to share? What have you got going on for people to stay in touch with you?
Yeah, I mean, if you want to keep in touch with me, I'd love it if you just sent me an email. Just shoot me an email first so I can get to know you.
What's your email?
Best email address for me is melissajoykong at Gmail. And, if you're interested in learning more about the newsletter right now, it's like, so there's no website, nothing yet. We're like really, 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 oh yeah, that's it. Really early on in the stages with the Gray Report. But I'd love to add you to the list if the idea of getting a newsletter every day to help you make sense of the news in 10 minutes or less is appealing to you and something that speaks to you. Send me an email, introduce yourself first, because I'd love to get to know you and learn more about you. And that's really it. I mean, I just kind of want to get to know new people. So feel free to reach out.
And the Gray Report is so good, guys, especially if you want to stay updated. I mean, there's one problem I have with a lot of people in the conscious and spiritual communities is that we tend to want to bury our head in the sand and not actually know what is kind of happening in the world. And I think it's important that we do, especially as global leaders and change makers and influencers who want to see change on the planet. We've got to know what we're changing, what we're working towards. So absolutely go over, email Melissa, get on that list. She's truly an inspirational and one-of-a-kind gal, and she's got so many brilliant things to say, and you will learn a lot from that report. I've been learning so much from it in the last several weeks of being subscribed to it. So that's awesome. And as for myself, I've got some exciting news. I'll be revealing a little bit more to the audience as time goes on over the next couple of weeks, but I just launched my latest offering, which is in a little bit of a different direction, and it's not at the same time. I'm starting to do my evenings with V. They are channeling experiences and practical guidance for global change makers and leaders and influencers, visionaries. It's bringing higher dimensional knowledge and wisdom and very practical, to the point guidance and support to help us up level and upgrade and get activated to a much more aligned, higher level of consciousness place within ourselves, so that we can go out and really fulfill our missions in a really incredible way. I'm still learning as I'm going with that too, around the benefits and all the wonderful things that are coming in that experience, but it is one of a kind, and the feedback I've been getting has been awesome. So if you want to learn more about that, I will hopefully be traveling for these evening experiences over time to different parts of the world. That is an intention. If I have a part of my will to express that and speak that into form, I would love to do that. But I'm also offering immersive private experiences where we work together for the day. You'll have a one-to-one channeling session, and then you will also receive a strategic plan, both with your leadership, with your mission, with your work, with your love life, whatever it is that you're bringing to the table. We're going to work through that at a high level so that you have the ability to ground the information that's coming from a higher dimension or from a higher place into your practical day-to-day life. I'm all about that. I think that one of my specialties is being able to pull all this information from up here and be able to bring it into the the world and make use of it, practical use of it. Because if it's not practical, then why the hell do it? So I'm offering these immersive private experiences as well as luxury high-end retreats for individuals who are interested in that. So PM me and we'll talk about that. But for now, yeah, I just launched Evenings with V, and I've got my first one coming up August 19th in San Diego, and my next one will be September 2nd in Toronto, Canada. So if you're in any of those cities, or you will be in those cities, and this sounds like really interesting and intriguing to you, would love to have you there. So that's what's going on for me. It's been a lot.
Oh my gosh, I love it. I'm so excited for you. You're just
Thank you.
a powerhouse.
Thank you.
I know we're out of time, but I have a last question.
Yeah, go for it. And thank you, Brooke, for your support. Thank you, love.
She's great. We need to get coffee, Brooke. So I was just wondering, because one of the most powerful exercises I've ever done, maybe this would be useful for anyone watching this, is whenever I'm stuck in something or just kind of want to make sure that I'm on the path I want to be on, the question I always ask myself is, what would my 70-year-old self say to me in this moment right now? It's really amazing what comes up and comes out, and actually how much wisdom there is that you can sort of channel from a different place. So I'm curious, what do you think your 70-year-old self would say to you right now?
Okay, give me a second. Let's see. Literally just heard, just have fun with it. Go for it. Like, it's so simple, and like this feeling of like, you don't need to take it so seriously, just have the fun with it. You know, and to go for it. You know, I think so much of our own self-doubt or our fears when we're in the moment tend to, you know, infiltrate how we're feeling moment to moment, or in the things we're ready to execute and like really step into. And there's been a lot of fear around this for me, for sure. But I think, yeah, when I'm 70, it's like I call it your future self. Like, what would your future self say about this? Or what would your future self thank you in this moment for you doing this? And I think the answer is yes. It's like, just, this is such an experience and wild ride. How about you? What would your 70-year-old self say?
Don't worry about the dots connecting. The dots will all connect and form a pattern that you couldn't even like make up on your own. Just worry about making good dots.
Yeah.
Just worry about every experience being a good experience, and, you know, put everything, you know, your heart and soul into everything. And not everything has to connect in some, you know, interesting forward, like linear trajectory. Just have fun, make good dots, and be delighted by how they connect later on. I think that's what my 70-year-old self would say.
I think my 70-year-old self might like that one too.
I think our 70-year-old self should be friends.
I think so too. Yeah. Oh, I love you. You're amazing. So much like juice and goodness in this conversation. Thank you so much for being here. And thanks to those of you who tuned in. Brooke, thank you for being here. You're so welcome. Jeffrey, and to anybody else who tuned in live, and for those of you who caught the replay, I hope that this was valuable for you and, you know, caused some new insight and awareness, or even ahas. And if it didn't, that's okay too. we showed up and we just did what was the most alive for both of us, and it's been so fun to do it with you. So thank you for being here. I'll be back I think in a couple weeks. I think I'll be traveling then. But I do have my next guest lined up, and she's awesome. Every woman is that's coming through this. So thank you again. I'll see you guys in a couple weeks. Much love to all of you. And we'll see you soon on the next Elite Women Live conversation series. Bye, everyone.
Bye.